Hello everyone. This semester we will talk about Shakespeare and his plays. And before beginning to discuss his plays and Shakespearean drama, first we will talk about the Renaissance period and the general characteristics of theater buildings, and theater companies in this period. And then also talk about the predecessors of Shakespeare and contemporaries of Shakespeare, and we will analyze some of his plays together. And let's first talk about the late Middle Ages and the beginning of the Renaissance period, the early Renaissance. And as you know, the late Middle Ages and the early Renaissance coexisted, and the medieval elements remained dominant into the 1500s in many places in England. And the same forces that undermined the medieval culture they were also very important in creating the culture of the Renaissance. And because both the waning, the disappearance of the culture of the Middle Ages, the emergence of the Renaissance culture, both of them can be contributed to the decline of feudal system, the growth of the cities, and the increased power of the princes, and especially the challenge of the monarchy to the church dominance over learning and life in England. And some scholars in Western world call the period from the about 1500 up until the Industrial Revolution of the late 1700s, the early modern period. And this early modern period, they call this period early modern period. This period overlaps with the Renaissance period and several other periods. Renaissance is associated with a revived interest, a revival in the interest in the humanistic ideals of classical world. Humanism marked a return to the concern for the worth of humanity and the earthly life. And the humanists were not, they are not religious people. Also, they were not irreligious. And they championed human virtues and human ideals. And also they gave importance to the classical teachings as well, like justice, loyalty, courage, and duty to yourself and others. And also these humanists established as ideals the qualities they thought humans at their best capable of, the ideals. And these ideals they would dominate the Western world into the 20th century. Okay? And the Renaissance was an era of expansion through geographical exploration, scientific experimentation, and also creativity in art and literature. And in education, the goal became the development of the universal human being. And this universal human being, this ideal, is skilled in many fields like science, politics, sports, and art. And the Renaissance had its earliest and greatest influence in Italy first, and then in Spain and in England. And Renaissance ideas had a very important influence on drama. Okay, and the method of staging plays in these countries continued to owe much that to the traditions of Middle Ages era. And because of the wars and internal strife in England was kept affected by the Renaissance until the late 15th century. And As you know, England was conquered by the Normans in the 11th century, and since the Norman conquest in 1066, England's kings had also controlled extensive territories in France as well. And in 1337, England laid claim to the French throne, and as a result of this claim, the Hundred Years' War began between these two countries. Okay, and it was during the early years of this war, the Black Death ravaged Europe, and for a time, England seemed to be winning this war. And but after the death of Henry V, the King of England, and the victory of Joan of Arc in France, the English people, they rapidly lost control in this war. And also, at about the same time, there was a struggle in England for the throne of England. Okay, the civil war between the House of York and the House of Lancaster, between two rival houses. And this war is called the War of the Roses. And this war continued until 1485, when Richard III was defeated by the Earl of Richmond, and this Earl united these two houses, okay, is Henry VII. And Henry VII founded the Tudor line in England. And Tudors ruled England until the death of Elizabeth I in 1603. The Tudors were very important in England. The kings and queens from the Tudor family, Tudor house, they were very important. They played a major role in the development of drama in the country, and also they played a major role in religious conflicts as well. Okay? They brought a strong central government to England. And many forces eventually shaped the great English drama of the 16th century. And among the most important of these were the religious and political controversies that led up to the reign of Henry VIII. Okay, Henry VIII was the King of England at the beginning of the 16th century, between 1509 and 1547. He was the father of Elizabeth I. Okay, and Henry VIII broke up with the Roman Catholic Church. Okay, during his reign, there was a separation between Roman Catholic Church and English Church. Okay, and these actions of Henry VIII were more political actions rather than religious. And these actions affected the future of England. And after Henry, he was followed by his oldest daughter, Mary the First. Okay, and Mary the First was a Catholic queen, and also she was England's first ruling queen in 400 years. And she ruled the country between the years 1553 and 1558. And she tried to return England to Catholic belief again. And she married a Catholic, Philip II of Spain. And Henry VIII's other daughter, Elizabeth I, she was a Protestant. Okay, and she followed her sister Mary, and again she returned the country to Protestant belief one more time. And when we look at the development of drama at the beginning of the 16th century, the beginning of the 16th century is called the Tudor period, the early Tudor period, the early Renaissance. Okay, when we look at early Tudor drama, although medieval theatrical practices continued to be dominant in the early years of the 16th century, the spirit of the Renaissance began to be felt in England, especially during the reign of Henry VIII. Erasmus and other humanists came to England during this period, and these men taught at both Oxford and Cambridge universities. They gave English scholars and writers an interest in classical literature. And the court of Henry VIII saw the first influences of humanism on drama, and during the reign of the Henry VIII's father, Henry VII, we see some examples of these influence in drama, like Medwall's play Fulgens and Lucrece, and this play was performed in 1497. Okay, and this was as a result of the influence of the morality plays in the late Middle Ages. Okay, and these were at the beginning of the Renaissance period. During the early Tudor period, the nature of the early works was didactic. Okay, like the nature of the medieval drama, they were didactic. But they lost their didactic nature, especially during the reign of Henry VIII, as a result of Henry VIII's break with the Catholic Church. And Oxford graduates were the early leaders in spreading the new approaches, new interest to learning into the schools, into the universities. William Lilly was important. William Lilly studied staging Latin comedies, and also Haywood. He was a court musician, and also he was the author of the first non-didactic interlude in England. And another important name was Nicholas Udall. Nicholas Udall became the headmaster of Eton College, and he wrote one of the best-known early Tudor comedies, Ralph Roister Doister. And while writing this comedy, he was influenced by a Roman playwright, Plautus, and Plautus' play The Braggart Warrior. And another important writer is Richard Edwards. He worked with the children of the Chapel Royal, and he wrote Damon and Pythias, the first English play with a complex plot structure. And humanistic performances were flourishing at Cambridge University and Oxford University by the years 1520s. And in 1546, Queen's College at Cambridge, this year was very important for this university and for the development of drama, because they constructed a removable theater structure for their main hall. And at these universities, who were the performers, who were the actors of these plays? Of course, the students, the lecturers, the teachers. They were the writers of the plays. They were the writers. They adapted the plays of the Roman playwrights, and the students, they were the actors. Okay, they performed. Students performed plays. They performed plays in Latin and sometimes in English. Okay, and they performed these plays. They staged them for the members of the university, and sometimes they invited guests from the outside of the university. And the best known of the plays in English was Gammer Gurton's Needle. Gammer Gurton's Needle. This play was written sometime between 1552 and 1563, and this play was very important because this was the first and best English play. Okay, the content, the subject matter was English. Okay, it was not an adaptation. This is very important. And this play fuses subject matter and characters, the English subject matter, English characters, similar to those typical of the medieval plays. Okay, but they borrowed their techniques from Roman comedy. The subject matter and the characters were English, local, but the techniques were borrowed from Roman theater, Roman comedy. And in this play, the writer develops a series of comic misunderstandings between two neighboring households. And the humanistic influences seen in schools and universities were carried to other places as well during this period. The early Tudor drama begins first in schools and universities, okay? And it was developed by teachers and students of these schools and universities first. Then it was carried to other places like London's Inns of Court or Gray's Inn of Court, Lincoln's Inns of Court, the Inner Temple, and the Middle Temple. These are the principal places, okay, for the inns of court. All these inns are principal places for the residence and training of the lawyers. And these places for the training of the lawyers, these are associations for the lawyers, and also they provided for the development of drama at the beginning of the 16th century during the early Tudor period. Okay, and again, of course, these lawyers, they were graduates of Oxford and Cambridge universities. Okay, these wealthy and aristocratic students were taught music, dancing, and other art forms, and they practiced these skills through the presentation performance of these plays. And also the audience, when we look at the audience of these early plays, the audiences were aristocratic as well. They were well educated. They were interested in the latest fashions in drama, both at home, in the country, and also abroad. Okay. And in 1561, the Inner Temple presented the first English tragedy. What is the title of the first English tragedy? Gorboduc. Gorboduc was written by Thomas Sackville and Thomas Norton. And the following year, it was presented at Whitehall with Queen Elizabeth, and she was one of the members of the audience in the following year. And the subject of this first tragedy was chosen from the history of England, okay? But when we look at the techniques used in this first English tragedy, the techniques were borrowed from Seneca, another Roman playwright. Okay, and because when we look at the structure, we can say that the plot structure is divided into 5 acts. Okay, and also this first tragedy established the fashion for modeling tragedies in this period on the works of Seneca. Beginning with this first tragedy, all the tragedy playwrights, all the writers writing tragedies, they based their tragedies on the tragedy of Seneca. Okay, the revenge tragedy, the tragedy of blood. And we have some other important works like the Supposes presented in 1566. It was an adaptation of Ariosto's I Supposotti, okay, an Italian writer. And despite the humanistic influence in this period, in the early Tudor period, also medieval practices, medieval conventions, traditions continued to dominate English theatre through most of the 16th century. Entertainers of all sorts traveled all over the country, and the local communities continued to produce the farce comedies and interludes as well. And they aimed to attract a wide audience, not just the aristocratic audience, well-educated ones, but also the audience from other classes, the lower classes as well. And biblical stories also continued to be mingled with the adaptations of chivalric tales or some foreign tales, foreign classical myths. And although Elizabethan drama and the Renaissance drama owes much to the classical influence, and especially the classical influence of the Roman period, also it owes to the support of schools, universities, the inns of court. Okay, they also owes to the medieval drama, the traditions, the conventions of medieval drama. Okay, and the later plays were a mixture of elements from all the preceding native medieval drama as well as the new classical learning. Okay, both of them, both the classical learning and the conventions of medieval drama, these both sources are very important for the development of Renaissance drama. Okay, both of them are very important. And the development of school drama in this period may be divided into 3 phases, 3 stages. First, the plays of Plautus, Terentius, and Seneca were read, studied, and performed in Latin at schools and universities. And then, in the second stage, Englishmen began to write their own plays in both Latin and English in direct imitation of the Roman drama. And then in third stage, the English dramatists combined classical techniques with the English subjects and backgrounds. And in this final stage, in this final phase, the imitation of classical models was largely unconscious, and the plays here, although most frequently they were written and produced at universities, they could easily be transferred to the public stage as well. And the most famous of these plays especially was written in during the 1560s. Okay, this play combines the new classical learning and the conventions of medieval drama. Okay, and its full title is very long. Okay, let me find and read the title for you. It's very long. A lamentable tragedy mixed full of pleasant mirth, containing the life of Cambyses, king of Persia, from the beginning of his kingdom unto his death, his one good deed of execution, after that many wicked deeds and tyrannous murders committed by and through him, and last of all, his hideous death by God's just appointed. This is the title of this play. It's a very long title, and this play mixes local English characters with abstractions typical of morality plays, and also it uses classical mythological figures as well. Okay, it is a combination of both local medieval conventions and traditions and classical learning. Okay, and it was out of these various influences that a new drama emerged in England between during the 16th century, especially between 1580 and 1642. Okay, and this period is very important in England for the development of drama. Okay, the Tudor period, the Renaissance period, begins in England in the early years of 16th century. Okay, but we see the early examples of drama during this period, but the most important period is Elizabethan period. Okay, during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, the daughter of Henry VIII. And the most important period, the golden age of English drama, was the period between 1585 and 1643. Pardon, 42. Okay, this period is called the golden age of drama in England. Okay, and we have many predecessors of Shakespeare during the second half of the 16th century. Okay, we will talk about these predecessors next week. Before them, his predecessors, we should talk about Elizabethan theater structure, Elizabethan theater companies, theater groups. Okay, and before considering how the dramatists of Shakespeare's age built upon the work of these predecessors, we should examine the physical theater, the physical conditions of theater buildings, and the conventions in these buildings and in groups, in theatrical companies. And when we look at these theatrical structures, okay, there are two kinds in this period, two kinds of theater buildings. Okay, these two kinds are open air. The first one is open air structure, the second one is indoor hall. Okay, the first one, open air structure, these structures are often referred to as public. Okay, the open air structures are called public. Indoor structures, indoor halls are called as private. Okay, one of them is public, the other is private. But in actuality, both of them were public in the sense that they were open to anyone. They were open to anyone willing to pay the money, pay the admission. Okay, but private theaters, the indoor theaters, were smaller in size, so they charged higher admission fees for the audience. And beginning about 1610, the same troupes played in public theaters in summer. They performed their plays in open-air structures during summer months and in private theaters in winter. And during this period, there were at least 9 public playhouses, and these at least 9 public playhouses were built before 1615. And the first one is the theater. Okay, the first public playhouse was called the theater, and it was constructed in 1576. And the other is the curtain, and also we have Navington Butts, the Rose, the Swan, the Globe, the Fortune, the Red Bull, the Hope. These are the 9 public playhouses built before the year 1615. And when we look at these playhouses, the most important one was the Globe. Okay, and because Shakespeare worked there, Shakespeare worked for this theater. He wrote for this theater, the Globe. And all of these playhouses were built outside the city limits. Okay, and they were built either in the northern side of the city or on the south bank of the river Thames. And when we look at these buildings, these theaters varied in size, and most of them had 2,000 seats for the spectators, for the audience, and they were of different shapes, and some of them were round, some of them were square and 5-sided or 8-sided. Okay, and when we look at the typical characteristics of these buildings, in most of them there was a large central space in the middle. Okay, this large central space was unroofed. Okay, there was no roof over this large central space, and this large central space was called pit. Okay, this pit, this area was enclosed by 3 galleries. Okay, these 3 galleries, they were roofed. Okay, and these 3 galleries formed the outside of the building. Okay, and at the door to the theater, each person had to pay the same price for the entrance, and but the price changed if they wanted to stand in the pit or if they wished to sit in the galleries. Okay, if they wished to sit in the galleries with roof, they had to pay an additional fee. Okay, and also at least one gallery had some private boxes for the lords, for the gentlemen, and also we have a stage, of course. This stage was raised. Okay, and this raised stage extended into the center of the pit, and this was a large platform. This stage was a large platform, and this large platform extended into the center of the pit was called forestage or main stage. It was the principal acting area. Okay, and the spectators could stand around the three sides of the stage. Okay, and there were two large doors. These two large doors at stage, they served as entrances and exits for the actors. Okay, and these are the general characteristics of these public playhouses. Okay, I will not talk about the details of these playhouses. Okay, let me summarize one more time. When we look at the basic outline of the stage, there was a large platform. Okay, it was extended to the middle of the middle of the central area. Okay, there were two or more doors at the rear, at the back of the stage. Okay, and we have the pit area for the standing spectators. We have galleries, okay, for the spectators to sit. Okay, and also we have one gallery for the lords, for the gentlemen. Okay, this is the basic outline of the theaters. Okay, and also they used some machinery, some techniques here in these playhouses. And for example, most often they used trapdoors in their plays, and also they used cranes, some sound effects, and ropes and pulleys for raising and lowering objects, okay, during the play, during the presentation. Okay, these are all about the public playhouses. Okay, and when we look at the private ones, the indoor halls, the first private theater was opened in 1576. It was opened in Blackfriars. Okay, and Blackfriars was a fashionable area in London. Okay, and it was remodeled from a large room in a monastic building in a monastery, and it was used by boys' companies until it was closed in 1584. The second Blackfriars Theatre was built by James Burbage in 1596. Okay, and when the boys' company was forbidden, the Burbages reassumed the possession of the Blackfriars Theatre, and the as I said before, the private theaters, they served as homes for during the winter season. Okay, and Blackfriars Theatre became the winter home of the King's Men after the year 1610. And when we look at the basic features of these private theaters, the private theaters differed little from the public ones. First, they had roof. Okay, they had roof. They are roofed, and they were also restricted in size. They were smaller in size when compared to the one, and because of this restriction size, their seating capacity and their seating capacities were only about one to half of the capacity of public theaters, and all spectators were seated in the pits or galleries in private boxes, and again the stage was raised, and this background was similar to the background in the public theaters. And the Elizabethan theatre included many features similar to the theatres of the past structures. Okay, and for example, it has the scenic backgrounds at the rear of the stage, okay, like we see in Roman theater, and the acting area was surrounded by spectators, as we see in Greek theaters, okay. And also some other features are related to the features of the medieval staging, medieval the staging techniques of the medieval period. For example, the practice of having spectators stand in the pit area. This is a tradition in medieval periods. Also, the use of special effects. We see the use of special effects also in medieval period. Okay, and the Elizabethan theatre combined all the staging techniques and the basic conventions of the theatres, both from the Greek drama, Greek theatre, Roman theatre, and also medieval theatre. Okay, it combined all these features to create a unique structure that was both original and also it was also derivative, okay, because they also borrowed them from other theaters, other nations theaters, okay. And when we look at the lighting of these theaters, in public theaters, no artificial illumination lighting was required because the performances occurred out of the doors, outside, and in the afternoon. Okay, and they use the daylight. Okay, but the private theaters probably used candlelight. Okay, and also in both kinds of theaters, the night scenes were indicated by bringing on candles or torches. Okay, and when we look at the costumes of these, the plays staged on these stages of both public and private theaters, we can say that there were two basic kinds of costumes: the contemporary clothing and conventional clothing. Okay, and by far the majority of the roles were costumed in Elizabethan dresses, and these Elizabethan dresses was appropriate to the rank, to the class and profession of each character. Okay, and also there were certain stereotypes of characters in this period, and these such stereotypes of the period made it necessary to use some conventional clothing styles for some characters. For example, there were some special foreign groups like Romans, Turks, or Spanish people in Spanish characters in these plays, and they used some conventional costumes for these foreign groups, foreign characters. And also there were some supernatural beings like ghosts, witches, and fairies in plays, and they used also some special costumes